And then when it was all about putting value out there for other people, then it just started to click.
This one's for the disruptors, the uncommon, the unconventional, the rebels. You're not here to take things lying down. Well, season 2 is about shaking things up. I'm Beatrice, and this is the Art of Branding podcast. Be ready. Be badass. Let's shake some shit up. How can you take an industry that's been doing the same thing in the same way for decades and shake it up? That's what we're speaking about with fellow podcast host of the Beyond Fulfillment podcast and president and co-founder of EZDC 3PL, providing logistics for e-commerce brands, where Dave here has been bringing the human element to build the brand awareness and following. Now, Dave, thanks for coming on. You've been using your personal brand to drive interest and sales in your business. Like, how have you found that? Have there been any challenges, etc.?
It's been a journey, and I've been pleasantly surprised. And just to give you some context here, so we started this logistics company about 2 years ago, and prior to that, we come from the pharmaceutical industry in a niche section of the market, to where you didn't really need to have a personal brand, so to speak, to do business and be successful and, to get customers. So we were just used to doing that way of business for the past 20 years. And when we came over to logistics, we came because we saw some problems in the market that we thought we were very well suited to serve. So we're like, great, let's go over here and start this other vertical. And so we did. And I quickly realized that it's not at all like the pharma industry where we came from, where you could just call customers and everyone was kind of buying what you're selling and you could do business that way. Meaning, you had to really be visible and people had to find you at the right time, and people had to know who you were. People had to vet you out against many, many other people that might look just like you on paper. So I quickly realized it was going to be necessary to really get out there and build a personal brand. And so that's what I started doing. I started on LinkedIn, posting every day, content, trying to add value, and that worked well to get leads and whatnot, but I was still having a bit of a conversion issue. And then I had the idea one day to start a podcast. It just came to me out of nowhere. Really because I had so many conversations on my founder's journey where the best source of learning and ideas and really getting through some of these issues was talking to other founders and other entrepreneurs on that same journey, whether on show or at a trade show or a networking call or whatever it may be. And I thought, if I could put these conversations in a public forum, the audience would get a benefit, the guest would get exposure, I would benefit. So it seemed like a truly win-win. And I had no experience in podcasting. I didn't know anything. And luckily, my marketing team, one of them has her own podcast. And she said, it's not hard. We'll help you get started. You just have to do the interviews and get it out there. And so I just said, okay, great, let's do it. And we literally just threw it together and got started. And now we've published 70 episodes in just over 10 months. And yeah, it's worked wonders in terms of lead generation, lead conversion, exposure, trust building, and just really, helping us grow our brand in an industry that we're newcomers to, all the way around. So yeah, it's been a great move.
So I can imagine like these brands when they're, you're talking to them, etc. Like, is there some part of the conversation or like something that draws their attention to you to get those leads from the podcast, or is it just because you're sharing clips and then it people like, oh hey, I can relate with that like specific pain point or something like that that's come up?
Yeah, I think it's a little of both. So our value prop is for emerging e-commerce brands to where they're doing maybe self-fulfillment and they've graduated to the point where they really need to outsource that, or they're already with another 3PL, third-party logistics provider, and they're not happy with the service. And that's been a real big issue too in terms of, some of the national larger 3PLs kind of, not servicing in the same manner brands that maybe aren't at a certain package volume or they're not big enough. So there's a big part of the market that's underserved in terms of quality and competitive pricing if they're not at a certain level of volume. So that's really where we started and in our serving. And when they go out and look, right, if you just Google 3PL, I mean, depending on where you're looking or where you're at, I mean, there's over 10,000 3PLs in the U.S. alone. So you're out there in a sea of so many other people that look just like you. And, I noticed as I was going through this, so many of them operate as faceless, nameless brands. So just being able to get out there and be authentic and post videos every day and let people get to know who I am and what I'm about, that in itself has been great. I mean, I've heard other people refer to it as like a digital handshake, to where people can just see you and see what you're talking about and see who you are and say, I'd like to get to know this guy better. This might be someone I want to do business with. Let me call him. And then we tie it all, everything into with the YouTube, with the podcast, with our website, with the Google My Business. It all ties into Google. So we do very well, even against, people that pay for ads, even if they're looking in a Google search, whether in our state or in our region. So we get a lot of leads, and if we can service them ourselves and it makes sense, great. And if not, I have a network of partners through every region of the U.S. where, I've been able to place, numerous deals if people are looking for services in another region. So it's just been a great way to get out there and to, differentiate ourselves against so many other people that might look the same on paper.
My God, it's like, I get that. So even for me, for example, like I'm not familiar with the industry. So like when you mentioned 3PL or even like the name and everything, I Googled what is 3PL. I was like, when I read the whole thing, I was like, third party. Okay, got that. Okay. So like, I can just imagine how, there must be some element of that as well, where like, the acronym is not necessarily at the forefront, but having that human side and that connection, like, hey, we can actually see what's going on behind this brand when there's like every other company in the industry is like following the exact same very structured pathway. Like, this is what we do.
Yeah, well, and like you mentioned, the human element, trust is such a big part of the equation, because when we're dealing with these brands, right, many of them are newer or emerging, or they're at a certain level. So their inventory literally is like their entire livelihood in many cases. It's, they put all of their savings and all of their everything into their inventory to help grow this business. So when they're trusting you to send that to you and have you have custody of it and to fulfill their orders, I mean, you become a true extension of their business. So again, right, that barrier is people, they're always going to look you up before they send you your inventory. Who are these people? What are they like? And whatnot. So just the fact that you can be out there on video and they realize, like, if there's a problem, they're not hard to find, right? They're not going to just disappear and take my stuff, or because we've literally seen that happen. We've had people transition from other 3PLs where, that was done, inventory was missing, orders weren't filled, and it was just a nightmare for the brand. So, the more that, all of these branding efforts continue to grow and we get good testimonials and people see we continue to stay in business and create happy customers, that just adds to the trust building component, where they realize that if they do business with us, that we're going to do things the right way.
That's a very interesting perspective. So it's almost like, okay, when people are approaching it, let's take like a different industry, right? Like, it's like when they look it up, they almost want a Google, like, a name that's really well known, etc. And they're like, oh yeah, I can trust this because like it's really well known and well established. Whereas, say, for example, when you're coming in new, right? Like, you've already got these well-established companies and you're coming in fresh. You're like, okay, how can I, stand out against these guys who have like built like decades of reputation? And that angle in terms of like, hey, how about like a podcast? How about like actually letting people see behind that brand? Was there like that element of that?
I mean, at hindsight, yeah, absolutely. I had no idea that it was going to work out this well for us. Literally, when I had the idea, it was just something inside of me. I knew, I got to do this, even though no idea what I'm doing, even though I'm probably going to look like foolish in the beginning. I was like, whatever, right? Like this is something I got to do. And the one thing that's really helped is I've been consistent and I've just been able to keep doing it. And I didn't start with much, the very limited resources. We've been able to improve and grow over time and fix a lot of things. And, the more you do something, the better you get, and you start to develop that unconscious confidence. So again, I'm still very early on in the process, but just, it's been almost a year since I've been doing it. And I mean, we look at what we've built now. I mean, it's like night and day from when we started. So yeah, I'm just excited to keep doing it and to continue to grow all aspects.
So that's the thing, like a lot of businesses, like especially, if you've been in there for quite some time, it's like that point you're unwilling to try new things, but you have that advantage going into something like fresh, like, hey, what can we do differently? Like even just to have like that idea, right? Like people who have been in that industry for a long time, they're not necessarily going to be like, hey, let's get in a podcast. Or they might have like certain limitations around like, okay, this is how podcasts should be approached. Like, I don't know, like before we started this, we were talking about like even podcast styles, right? Like is it interview style? Is it like banter stuff? And I call banter. I'm sure like there's other words for it, right? Like, is it like, more of a conversational style? There we go. Like there's so many different approaches to even like that one thing, right? For them to even like consider that, we can do a podcast, but like, hey, like how are we going to do it like differently? And there is an opportunity because how many others in your industry are doing a podcast?
There's numerous logistics podcasts. Just to go back on another thing you mentioned too. So yeah, I guess in a sense, we were very fortunate because again, we're newcomers to the industry. So we're not in a fixed mindset in terms of the way things have always been done. And then in the very beginning, I fell on my face so much that I was like, okay, this isn't working. I've got to try something else. So, fortunately I wasn't hung up on some previous level of success where maybe I was, had pride or had any kind of other thought about this won't work, or I'm not going to do that. Or I'm like, look, we got to grow the business. So if this isn't working, let's try that. So, I had that type of mindset. But yeah, there's numerous other warehousing podcasts from people within the industry. But me, myself, I'm a lifetime salesperson, right? And so I'm not, I have a team, right? And I have other operational experts with me, but my focus has always been marketing and sales and, kind of bigger picture stuff and really growth focused. So, when I was looking at my podcast, what really excites me too, because I've always, studied personal development too, is just listening to interviews of other successful people and realizing, well, how did they overcome this challenge, or how did they get past that, or what did they face, and what can I learn from their journey and apply to my own, right? So it just was natural that like I want to interview other entrepreneurs, because that's the other thing too. So many people would congratulate me on, oh, you got this business and you're out there on social media and oh, that's so great, and congratulations. And you can attest too to the journey, right? People congratulate you and you're thinking, if you only knew what I'm going through and, some of the, just the challenges internally that you deal with. So I just wanted to have those conversations too, to really spotlight what people go through, what it's like, how they've overcome their challenges, and really get those positive messages out that could help other people. So that's been the focus of our podcast. And then, ironically enough, like literally every everyone we deal with is an entrepreneur. So if they have a physical product to sell, to fulfill, or to transport in some way, we potentially have a solution for that. So just the fact that I'm in that space talking to all these entrepreneurs has led to business as well. Even though I'm in the logistics industry, it's not really a logistics focused podcast.
That is incredible. Because, as you said, it is not something that's specifically focused. In a way, that's almost like you're getting closer to that, relating to, business owners and like their like deepest struggles, right? Like, as business owners, we faced a lot of like challenges along the way, and for someone, instead of like being like, hey, buy XYZ from me, like I promise it's going to be great. It's like, hey, I get the journey that you've been on. Like, that's almost like on a Nike level or a Nike level, like supporting that journey.
That's an interesting, and it's funny too, because when I started doing the podcast and just focusing on that and stopped so much like self-promotion within the content, that was really like the inflection point where things really started to grow for us. Ironically enough, when I stopped, quote unquote, trying to sell via the content, that's when the sales really picked up.
That's the thing, right? It's so much of that thought process of like, hey, there needs to be like, intentional, like, okay, we need to sell, as in like say that we're selling, rather than like connecting on those pain points. And then like, if there is that alignment, there will also like, that will also come. People will approach you as like, you mentioned from the podcast, like business owners have approached you and they're like, hey, actually, I need like help with this or XYZ. Right. So with your sales background, was that something that you've seen before? Is that like why you were trying this? Or it was just like, you're like, okay, I just want to like be able to talk to people and go in that direction?
Well, so even though I'd been in sales, 20 plus years, content creation, like social media content creation, was brand new to me. So when I started, learning how to do that and kind of the different strategies and systems that are out there, like one that I'm sure you've probably heard of is, focus 80% of your content on creating value for others and then 20% on self-promotion. Right. So, if I do a post every day, 5 days a week, 4 are going to be value creation and 1 is going to be self-promotion, but there's still once a week self-promotion. And so, even with what we do, right, you can only talk about that and say it so many different ways. And you know what I mean? It gets a little stale and boring. Like you're saying the same thing over and over and over again, like, hey, buy from me type of thing, to where, the podcast itself, there was so much to do for it. And it was so new to me that I just really immersed myself in all the aspects. And I didn't even realize it, but there was like no time for the self-promotion and just kind of faded away. And then when it was all about putting value out there for other people, then it just started to click. People, if they follow me or they see me, it's not hard to know what I do. So I don't have to sit and talk about it every day about, hey, we do ABC for a 3PL. Like they can look it up and there's spots they can go and they can reach out and have a conversation. And usually too, that's when, brands are looking at a specific time. Like it has to be right for them. The fact that you're just out there and you're visible and you're top of mind, or when they are searching, you can easily be found via your online presence. I mean, that's where we found some of the best relationships thus far.
Building that image, building that perception, like, hey, like this person, like on a personal brand kind of level, like this person can be trusted. Like I've been watching their show for like XYZ, like the number of episodes. That trust has been built, and it's like almost at the back of their mind, like, okay, I know this person like does this without actively saying it. Like, yes, there's also like that balance of like, people do need to know what it is that you do, right? And what it is that you like offer. And maybe like it is different with the industry, like, and how how much is searched intentionally compared to like other industries where, like, the way that they search is different? How do you find that?
Moving warehouses is a big decision, and it's not an easy process, right? So it's typically like a journey, right? It's a process that they're going to have they're going to talk to several people. They're going to look however they look. They're going to go through an evaluation process. They're going to get quotes from numerous people. They're going to, finalize based on whatever criteria it is. The sales cycle typically, it can be, it's all different, but usually several months, right? So, and you never know when that's going to start, and you never know what's going to precipitate that. Some people, my warehouse is closing. They gave me 30 days notice, so now I'm looking. Or some people, there's just too many mistakes. We got to move. Or some people, they have to wait till the contract is up, or whatever it may be. So everyone's on their own timeline. So it's just, again, the consistency and being out there. And, even I've done guest spots on numerous podcasts as well. And many of them are industry focused within logistics. So those live on, and, those people have followings for people that maybe are looking in different areas. So it's just continuing to put content out there that will live on and contribute to your search results and help get your message out to people. I just found the consistency with that has paid off.
You mentioned others in your industry. The podcast that they're doing, it's mainly just like industry related rather than like speaking with other founders?
There's one is like the logistics of logistics. That's a big long running one. And that's anything having to do with logistics. There's another one, everything is logistics, kind of same thing, wide range, the new warehouse, another one. Those are the three of the most popular ones within us. So they cover whether it's founders or really anything having to do with a popular logistics topic.
Okay.
But again, right, when people search logistics, all those people have big followings, and all, their word gets out with them. So, again, right, same thing, like being on shows like that adds credibility as well as my own, and as well as my lens that I offer with the entrepreneurship, focus. Been on others in terms of distribution or sales. This is art of branding, right? So yeah, I try to anything where there's like an alignment. I'm happy to be a guest.
Hells yeah! And is there anyone that inspires you, or any brand that inspires you who's like shaking things up in what you do?
I guess it's not even necessarily one person or one. There's numerous people I follow on LinkedIn, and I like their stuff and whatnot. But I think it's just, I like the idea of just being creative and just being real in terms of not so stuffy and not so, doesn't have to be so proper. Just like, listen, we're all real people dealing with real issues. And the more we can just get out there and have real conversations, that's, I find that works well. So, just trying to, I guess, just put a creative spin on whatever we're doing. But yeah, I guess no one comes to mind in particular that inspires me like that.
I get that. Okay, different question then. There is one question I ask everyone that comes on board, and that is, what is the one societal norm that you want to push back on and teach others about?
He has the Diary of the CEO podcast, and he's got a crazy story where it's just like failure, broke, failure, bankrupt, failure, boom, 100 million.
Incredible.
And he just didn't give up, and he just kept going. He's one of these ADD type entrepreneurs and always has ideas and believed in himself and just kept going. But the quote is that growth happens when you start doing the things that you're not qualified to do. And so I look at that and it's like, well, that's exactly, I wasn't qualified to be a podcaster. I wasn't, I'm not right. I had no experience or nothing really with social media. Even on the founder, I'm a lifelong sales guy and understood business and whatnot. But, as far as being a public founder too, I had no background with that too. I just started doing it. And once I realized what I didn't know, I learned it and kept doing it. And, still a journey, still a process. But I guess the norm would be you don't have to wait, because so many times your mind holds you back and thinks conditions has to be perfect, or, oh, I'm not good enough, or, oh, what if it doesn't work? Where if you just, when you know what you want to do, you just take action and start and get in motion and keep going and figure it out, and not be afraid to look like a beginner, and not be afraid of micro failing, which is part of the process, and to just not feel like you have to wait until you're qualified to act or to do something, or to say you're whatever, a podcaster or an entrepreneur or whatever it is, right? To just start and keep going. Like if you listen to so many successful people out there that have, the rags to riches stories, and the people that have overcome all this adversity, so many times you're going to find that they just started and they just took action and they kept going. And no matter what they faced, they didn't give up. So I guess that would be the norm, is you don't have to wait.
Hex freaking yes. That is a massive one where, we're just used to like, oh, we need to wait for this, or, until have like a little bit more education, or like just we need to go do a degree for that sort of thing. I feel like there's so much like nuance and like backing. Oh yeah, like I need to get a bachelor to be able to do this, or I need to, I don't know, I need to have a conversation, or I need to read like X number of books, or listen to X number of like podcasts to start doing this. So my God, that is a really good one. And anyhow, thank you so much for coming on, mate. Check out the podcast show notes for ways to connect and learn more about Dave. And if you loved the episode, a great way to support is popping in a 5-star review. And thanks for listening to the Art of Branding podcast. Ready to shift your business from just another to the obvious one? This is a badass way by B to get started. Let's freaking go.